Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, this is going to be my fight breakdown and my fight, well, I was about to say preview, excuse me, my fight review of the fight that just recently occurred between that of Jake Paul, the problem child, and of course, that of Mr. Tommy Fury. Well, of course, for those of you that did not hear how the fight ended up turning out, the fight ended up turning out exactly how I thought it was going to go, with Tommy Fury winning by that of a decision. I can't remember overall if I said unanimous decision or split decision, but I said that either way, I was not really going to be that surprised. I thought that they were going to try to get Jake Paul to win this fight. And to be honest with you, with as somewhat close as what it was at the end, at least somewhat relatively close, overall for maybe some of you that expected Tommy to dominate a little bit more, I thought that the decision was going to go to Jake Paul because, of course, a lot of the times in that of the boxing world or in that of the boxing scene, a lot of the times they basically give the close fight to whoever the A side is. And the reason why that is because boxing, at the end of the day, just like any other sport, it's a business. Now, is that me saying that everything is fixed and that everything all in all, that you shouldn't even watch it because it's just 100% fixed? That's not what I'm saying at all. But a lot of the times in boxing, we see certain fighters that are the A side in a fight maybe get a decision that probably wasn't quite just overall because they were kind of living off of their name or over the amount of money that they produce. Well, that's not what ended up happening here. For those of you that don't know, Tommy Fury did end up winning this fight by split decision. I believe that two of the scorecards for Tommy Fury, that it was 76 to 73, while the one scorecard for Jake Paul was 75 to 74. Now, personally, how did I score this fight? I believe I scored the fight 75 to 74 for Tommy Fury. I think that Tommy Fury, at least in my opinion, overall probably won a good solid 4 to 5 rounds clearly. But of course, the referee, who was, let me comment on that really quickly. The referee might have had the worst performance that I've seen, at least in terms of boxing, that I can remember. He may have had the worst refereed performance that I can personally remember out of any professional boxing fight that I can personally remember. Worse overall than even that one referee in the Amir Khan and Lamont Peterson fight. Worse overall than a certain amount of other referees that I've seen, whether it be in MMA like a Mario Yamasaki or overall some of these other guys. He had one of the worst performances that I've personally ever seen, or certainly is up there with being one of the worst performing referees in this fight. There were certain point deductions, in my opinion. He had one for Jake Paul and one for Tommy Fury. Now, who knows? Is there a potentiality to where that could have maybe meant, to make the fight more even between the two when it came down to it overall, to maybe make the fight even up a little bit more on the scorecards? It could be, who the hell knows? It also could be just that this referee was very, very poor at his job. It just is what it is. But I thought that the referee was very, very poor. One of the worst refereed fights that I've personally ever seen within my life of watching boxing, MMA, really almost within any sporting event. The referee was absolutely horrible throughout this fight. Absolutely horrible. No way that he ever should be invited again, in my opinion, to ever professionally judge overall another fight or to referee another fight. But anyways, Tommy Fury did end up winning this fight when it comes down to it. And of course, I did end up predicting Tommy Fury to win this fight. Why did I end up predicting him to win this fight? Because Tommy Fury was the first professional boxer that Jake Paul was going to now officially face. And not only was he overall a person that came from somewhat of a rich boxing history with that of the Fury family, but on top of that, when it comes down to it, he was a guy that was about the same size as Jake Paul. He had an 80-inch reach, a 4-inch reach advantage over Jake Paul. He was a guy that knew how to utilize his lead hand, and I knew that he was going to provide certain issues for that of Jake Paul. I've seen certain boxing analysts or certain boxing commentators or certain boxing channels saying, oh, Tommy Fury, he doesn't have it overall. I think Anderson Silva and all these other guys, that they were actually bigger challenges. And I said that personally, I didn't agree with that. But that's because overall I could tell that with what Tommy Fury was able to do in the ring, there are certain basics that if you know things about boxing, and if you've been experienced in boxing, if you competed in boxing and sparred in boxing, that you can see overall what certain people have done when it comes down to it, or what certain tools they may utilize, especially with that of the lead hand and their foot positioning and certain things. And that is not me saying that Tommy Fury is the most skilled boxer on the planet Earth, but he certainly was going to be the more skilled boxer than a Tyron Woodley. or than that of an Anderson Silva. So the people like a Paulie Malignaggi or certain other channels that I've seen that I like to commentate on here and there, like an Aki TV or some of these other people that claim that, oh, Tommy Fury, he's really not that good. Anderson Silva was, a much bigger threat. And let me also state this. Do I also think it was a coincidence that some of these channels, like that of Anaki TV, who are not fans of the Fury family at all because they still cannot get over that loss that Deontay Wilder suffered at that of Tyson Fury, do I think it's a coincidence that they predicted both Tyron Woodley and Anderson Silva to beat Jake Paul, but they predicted Tommy Fury to lose against Jake Paul? No, I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence. As I've said in the past, overall, I'm not trying overall to degrade a lot of these channels or anything, but do I believe that in their predictions, even that their bias will show through? Yes, I do. It just is what it is. And I believe that potentially that could have been one of these times, but maybe not. Maybe they just truly believe that Jake Paul was going to pull out of this fight. I thought that Tommy Fury was just going to pull out of it, which is exactly what happened. As I stated, his lead hand was going to be a very big weapon in this fight. He knew how to utilize his lead hand a hell of a lot more than any of the other opponents that Jake Paul had been in the ring with. And that's a very big difference between boxers and that of MMA fighters. When you take a look at a lot of MMA fighters, they don't utilize their jab or their lead hand anywhere near as efficiently overall as what a professional boxer will do. That's why a lot of people, once again, I remember the Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight, and a lot of people said, oh, well, Conor McGregor, in my opinion, he has a great chance over Floyd Mayweather Jr. because Conor McGregor, when it comes down to it, he trains in hand-to-hand combat as well. Right, but boxing hand-to-hand combat and MMA hand-to-hand combat, it's almost two completely different worlds. Yes, both throw hooks and uppercuts and overhands and jabs and crosses, but the way that they throw them and the foot positioning and with the stances, it's completely two different worlds. Completely two different worlds. And if you've competed in both of them or know something about both mixed martial arts and that of boxing, you would personally know that overall. I'm a little bit experienced in both, although I am personally more experienced in that of boxing. Not a professional by any means, but overall, my father helped me out with a certain amount of that. And of course, I've been studying both MMA and boxing for a very long time. And once again, Tommy Fury, he is a guy that he was going to utilize his lead hand and his counters a little bit better. He also was able to fight on the back foot a little bit better. Now, the fight was very competitive. At the end, it was somewhat decently close. When it came down to it, probably a little bit closer than what it needed to be. And let me also state this. Jake Paul was able, to give credit to him, he was able to knock Tommy Fury down actually once in the fight. Which I actually, I'm not 100% shocked, but if I were to predict that someone would have got knocked down in this fight, I actually would have predicted that it would have been Jake Paul. But let me overall give a lot of credit to Mr. Jake Paul for even being able to knock him down once. He was able to knock down Tommy Fury with a very stiff jab. Jake Paul actually has a very decent jab for the amount of training and the amount of experience overall that he has within boxing. I have to give him a lot of credit for that. And Tommy Fury did end up getting knocked down. Now, the first time I seen it, I thought that he maybe stepped on his foot because that's what it looks like. But after taking a look at the replay, I don't even think that their feet actually touched. I think overall that it was just a very stiff jab. Tommy ran straight into it. His head did not move out of the zone. And overall, there are certain times to where you can be knocked off balance with the jab. I've seen it with Miguel Cotto against Joshua Clottey. I've seen it overall with Tyson Fury against some of his opponents. And I've seen it with certain other boxers as well. I just cannot, necessarily remember at the current moment in time. Sergey Kovalev, of course, was able to do it against Anthony Yarde. And it was kind of the same thing here. He was able to knock him off balance. But other than that, Tommy Fury, in my opinion, he clearly did win the fight. Now, what ended up winning him the fight? In my opinion, once again, because he's actually a boxer. You can tell overall that he has certain things that Anderson Silva and Tyron Woodley and Ben Askren and some of those other guys that they just didn't know how to utilize. Once again, they didn't know how to utilize their lead hand. Their footwork is a little bit more clumsy, and I don't think that Tommy Fury necessarily has Floyd Mayweather Jr. or, someone else like that type of feet. But at the end of the day, he had decent enough foot positioning to move off of certain angles and to get in the correct punching positioning, which really helped him out a lot. And one of Jake Paul's weaknesses, as you can still clearly see in his game, is really one of two things. First of all, he needs to keep his hands up a lot more. A lot of people, when they first get into boxing, including myself when I first started getting into it, a lot of them like to keep their hands down because they believe that they can be a Terrence Bud Crawford or a Muhammad Ali or Floyd Mayweather Jr. and just stick their lead hand out there and overall draw their opponents out and be fast and quick enough and intelligent enough overall to hit them with certain counters. A lot of the times when you're facing an opponent that can actually challenge you, you're going to get hit with certain shots, especially with the jab and a lead right hand or a lead left hand, depending on what positioning of a fighter that you're going to fight. And that's why Jake Paul got hit with so many jabs in this fight overall, and also certain right hands, because he was not keeping his hands up when he needed to. Jake Paul's another one of these guys that you can tell still has a little bit of learning to do, depending on how much further his boxing career will go. Because once again, that is a beginner's mistake that you see a lot in the boxing gyms or in newer boxers. They like to keep their lead hand out there, and that's not always a bad strategy. That's not always the worst thing to do. But if you keep it out there constantly, especially somewhat lazy, or if you get a little bit too repetitive in your strikes, which Jake Paul was, he overall threw a decent jab to the body and a decent jab to the head, while overall ducking a little bit down to his right, which I actually thought was the correct thing to do. Where Jake Paul went wrong, in my opinion, is that he was a little bit too repetitive with his strikes. He was a little bit too repetitive with trying to go with the overhand right and the left hook, which is exactly what I knew he was going to go for. Those are pretty much his bread and butter punches. That's the main type of punches that he likes to go for. But what I will say is this: Jake Paul seems to have a very decent jab, especially for the experience that he has had and the fact that he was in there finally with a professional boxer. So I give him a lot of credit. He was even able to knock him down one round. So like I said, very, very, decent grit and toughness and somewhat of boxing IQ shown by Jake Paul for the amount of experience that he has had. But like I said, when it comes down to it all in all, some of his weaknesses did show through. Another weakness of Jake Paul you can very clearly see is his footwork. Sometimes when he throws certain punches, he's off balance. Sometimes when certain punches come at him, his feet overall, they're not really together as they should be. When I say that they're together, when it comes down to it, sometimes his feet will be in different positions, or they'll shuffle a little bit in a way that they should not be. Your feet overall need to somewhat be in rhythm together when it comes down to it. And at the end of the day, you need to move off on certain angles, and your feet need to be disciplined. You can tell with Jake Paul that his feet, that they're not necessarily disciplined. And a lot of the times with beginning boxers or certain people that try to get into the boxing game or even the MMA game, footwork a lot of the times is often the most difficult thing to train. Because a lot of the times that's just natural, or you somewhat have to have very great positioning, you have to have the confidence, or you have to have the boxing IQ. So it's very hard to train that a lot of the times, even with certain professional boxers. There are certain professional boxers that do not have great footwork that were champions, like Deontay Wilder. Canelo Alvarez is not always known for having the best of footwork when it comes down to it. Even the Charlo brothers, I don't think all the time had the best of footwork when it comes down to their foot movement. And there are certain other fighters that maybe I could point out. Now, Terrence Bud Crawford, Tyson Fury, some of those other guys, at least at this current moment in time in their career, they have very decent footwork, or they have very decent foot movement. And that's why they're able to fight in pretty much almost any positioning. Now, some of those other fighters that I mentioned, like Canelo, he can also fight overall in certain other positions, or he can fight pretty much in any position that he wants to as well. But sometimes his flat-footedness does cause him to have a little bit of problems. So overall, sometimes that can cause a little bit of issues. And Tommy Fury is not a guy, he doesn't have the worst foot positioning that I've ever seen. But in terms of his foot movement, it's not really the best. And that's why he ended up getting hit with a lot of jabs, because his hands also, a lot of the times throughout this fight, were not up when they needed to be. But what saved Tommy Fury was his 4-inch reach advantage, his jab overall, and his boxing experience. That's what ended up saving him here, and his foot positioning. His foot positioning at least somewhat looked good to me, but his foot movement and moving in and out and overall on the angles, he needs to work on that, because he gets hit way, way, way too much. He got hit way too much against that of Jake Paul. He got hit with way too many rights, way too many lefts, and way, 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 way too many jabs. There were certain times where I seen Jake Paul land 3 jabs in a row against that of Tommy Fury. And if you're a guy that plans on becoming a future champion in that of boxing, and I don't really know whether Tommy Fury plans to do that or not. Apparently he's been involved with modeling. Apparently he's been involved with other deals. So, sometimes when it comes to those guys, sometimes they work extra hard to try to prove that they're just not a soy boy, or that they're just not some sissy, and that they actually can do what their former family did, kind of like that of a Chavez Jr., and they try to live up to the father's name or that of their brother's name. Now, sometimes that can be a positive, sometimes that can be a negative. And like I also said, the anxiety, when it came down to it, it also was going to show. Let me tell you something, both fighters, they showed a lot of toughness and they showed a lot of grit within this fight. Who would I say maybe showed a little bit more anxiety? I would say towards the end of the fight, Tommy Fury. But at the beginning, I certainly thought it was Jake Paul, or maybe he was just trying to figure out certain things. I'm not necessarily sure. But I give Jake Paul, once again, a lot of credit. I was just talking to a friend, and he said, oh, well, Jake Paul is a joke, and overall, he's not going to beat a professional boxer. Let me tell you what. I've seen certain people overall, either when we talk about boxing gyms or even professional boxing, I've seen people much worse than Jake Paul. Now, once again, he's not going to beat anyone within the heavyweight or the cruiserweight division that's top 10 ranked. He's not going to beat any of those guys when it comes down to it. But at the end of the day, what Jake Paul has done by beating Tyron Woodley and that overall of some of these other guys, Jake Paul has proved that he's a little bit better than what a lot of people expected. Actually, a lot better. Because a lot of average Joes, once again, they love to talk all this shit about how they could do this and do that. They couldn't do what Jake Paul has done. At least not the majority of people. Is there maybe some people out there who could? Maybe. But the majority of people couldn't. That's why I give Jake Paul so much credit. And Le'Veon Bell and Chad Ochocinco so much credit when it comes down to it. Even if they're in there against a guy who hasn't boxed. Because boxing is one of the hardest sports that you can compete in. Just with the type of movements, just with the type of things overall, you have to have a high degree of boxing IQ and more than likely a decent amount of boxing experience overall to really be decently good at it. So that's why I give Jake Paul, once again, a great amount of credit. Even, yes, he ended up losing this fight, but you could debate that he ended up winning a good solid 3 rounds in this fight. Some may even be, debate 4, but I don't think I would debate that. I would say that Tommy Fury, in my opinion, that he won this fight probably 5 rounds to 3. And once again, the referee was absolutely awful. Absolutely awful. Unless he was paid, once again, behind the scenes to deduct a point from both sides to make the fight possibly a draw or that much more closer, then he did his job perfectly. But if not, he was absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrific. But that's pretty much about it. Anyways, congratulations, of course, to Mr. Tommy Fury. Do I believe that Tommy Fury is going to beat Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury or Jared Anderson anytime soon? No, I don't. When it comes down to it, and to be quite honest with you, after this fight, he probably would be better off in another career avenue. This is my personal opinion, but we'll see what ends up happening. Now, the bigger question is there going to be a rematch overall between that of Tommy Fury and over that of Jake Paul? Well, we're going to have to see what happens with that. I would actually like to see a rematch overall between the two, but that's Jake Paul's decision because Jake Paul has a rematch clause. We'll see overall what he does. And if he doesn't take the rematch clause, in my opinion, that's not the biggest deal in the world. A lot of people may criticize him. But the truth is that maybe the best thing for Jake Paul is not to take an immediate rematch against someone like a Tommy Fury. Because Tommy Fury is the guy that ended up beating him first in his career. And once again, a lot of people, they want these guys or they want these gals to go immediately into a rematch when that's not always necessarily the best thing. Sometimes you need to reflect, and sometimes you really need to improve as a fighter, IQ-wise and skill-wise. That's why Deontay Wilder, once again, he ended up getting his ass kicked even worse in the 3rd fight. Now, of course, he ended up getting a couple of knockdowns. He also ended up out flat on his face in that fight when it came down to it. That's why Deontay Wilder ended up getting beat up so bad, because he had no time to improve as a fighter. When it came down to it, you need fights, you need other fights under your belt, you need experience, otherwise you're not going to improve as a fighter, period. Point blank. Just is what it is. I don't care who you are. At least usually, are there exceptions to the rule? Yes, there's exceptions to the rule, but that's what a lot of people need. So that's why I don't criticize certain people like Canelo for not facing Dimitri Bivol immediately after he ended up losing the way that he did. But that's pretty much about it for this video. I just thought that I would commentate on that. Once again, I knew that Tommy Fury was going to give Jake Paul problems. That other fighters in his career was not going to be able to give. His foot positioning overall was going to be better. The use of his lead hand was going to be better. He was actually going to be a little bit bigger than Jake Paul, possibly more powerful than Jake Paul as well when it came down to it. And on top of that, he was going to have a 4-inch reach advantage, the boxing experience, and just certain tools that other MMA fighters especially don't have. They're not boxers. All right, Tommy Fury is actually a boxer. So it is what it is. But anyways, that's really about it. Now, once again, certain people may say, well, I still don't think that he's that great. No, he's not that great, but he's still a boxer. He's still a better boxer than any of the other fighters that Jake Paul has fought in his career, period, point blank. So we'll see what ends up happening. But Jake Paul is going to be very interesting to see where he goes from here. If he doesn't decide to rematch that of Tommy Fury, what would I overall suggest for him? Maybe possibly a fight against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. That would be a fight, in my opinion, that could potentially go over decently well. That would be a professional boxer. When it came down to it, probably a professional boxer that he may be able to beat. Whether Chavez Jr. is going to take a dive in that fight or not, who knows? We'll see. What we do know is that Chavez Jr. is that he does not seem very heavily motivated in his boxing career at the moment. So we'll see what happens with that. You know, possibly the Hassan Rahman Jr. fight again. You know, we'll see what ends up happening. But anyways, that's really about it for the video. I just thought that we would talk about that. Thought it'd be very, very particularly interesting. That's really about it for today. But thank you so much for watching. Congratulations to that of Tommy Fury. And congratulations also to Mr. Jake Paul. For a person overall that, once again, that he has not been really that much trained in professional boxing. He's shown a lot of courage. He's shown a lot of grit. He's shown a lot of great direction when it comes down to it. So I have to give him a lot of credit. I'm not someone that likes to tear someone down overall because they try something and actually had the courage to try something. Now, what I do criticize certain people for, even though I am a harsh critic, I will criticize certain skill sets like I did of that of Jake Paul. I also criticize when I think that people are making excuses when it comes on it. And I am much harsher on people that are actual professional boxers and people that I've been trained within the circuit because their skill sets should be higher. But it is what it is. Anyways, you know, good on Jake Paul when it comes down, and good on Tommy Fury as well for winning the fight. Very interesting fight, very great fight. But Tommy Fury, in my opinion, probably won the fight about 5 rounds to 3. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.